Imagine standing in front of a room of, just terrified people who have just been diagnosed with Parkinson's, looking them right in the eye and telling them they can reduce their symptoms by up to 60%,
Right.
and doing that without them taking a single new pill.
Yeah, that is a huge claim.
Welcome to the deep dive.
Yeah.
And we are talking to you directly today because you have a really profound responsibility. You are preparing to present the First Steps program.
Which is also known in some regions as Vita Felice, just to clarify.
Exactly, Vita Felice. It's this really intensive curriculum originally created by the European Parkinson Therapy Center over in Italy, and it's built entirely on their groundbreaking ReGen protocol.
Right, the ReGen protocol, which is all about regenerative neurological rehabilitation.
Yeah. So our mission today is to give you, the presenter, the comprehensive chronological guide on exactly how to deliver this material to your class.
Because it's a big commitment, right? It's an 11-hour journey spread over 4 days.
Yeah, 4 days.
And the overarching goal you have as the presenter is to facilitate this massive psychological and, frankly, biological shift.
Which is no small feat.
No, not at all. You're taking individuals who are currently paralyzed by the shock of what feels like an atomic bomb diagnosis.
Right. Their whole world just blew up.
Exactly.
Right.
And you are transitioning them into active, empowered protagonists of their own lives.
Okay, let's unpack this, because before you even get to day one, before you hand out a schedule or introduce yourself to the room, there's a core philosophy you just have to completely master.
Oh, absolutely. The foundational mindset.
Yeah, if you don't get this right, nothing else in those 11 hours will stick. I mean, you have to understand the fundamental paradigm shift from the machine to the garden.
Right. So for decades, the medical community, and by extension, basically everyone, viewed the human brain as a machine.
Like a literal machine.
Yeah. Like if you picture a really complex Victorian steam engine or a delicate pocket watch, you kind of understand the classic view of Parkinson's.
Hardware, basically.
Exactly. It's hardware. Over time, it slows down. A specific gear, which in this case represents the dopamine-producing neural circuits, it just breaks.
And you can't fix a broken gear naturally.
Right. Because it's a machine, it cannot naturally repair itself. It just, grinds down until one day it simply stops.
So if I'm a patient in that model, my role is just completely passive.
Totally passive.
I'm just the owner of a broken machine, sitting in a waiting room, hoping a mechanic, like a doctor, can put some synthetic oil in it.
Give you some pills.
Yeah. Give me some pills and hopefully delay the inevitable.
And that view breeds total despair. I mean, total despair.
Okay.
But the modern view, which is heavily backed by neuroscience, throws that outdated model completely out the window.
Thank goodness.
Right. So you have to teach your class that the brain is not a machine. It is a garden.
A garden. I love that imagery.
It's powerful. It's a living, dynamic ecosystem that is constantly growing and adapting. I mean, we typically only use about 10% of our brain's capacity. Right?
Wait, really? Only 10%?
Roughly, yeah. The point is, there is vast, untapped potential in the soil of the mind.
So, if we use this analogy in the course, we can tell participants that if a tree falls and blocks a path in a forest,
the forest doesn't die.
Right. The forest doesn't die. You don't stand there trying to glue the dead tree back together.
You'd look ridiculous trying to do that.
You forge a new path around it, you trample down the undergrowth, and you make a new way.
And that analogy perfectly encapsulates the actual science of neuroplasticity. The fallen tree represents the neural circuits damaged by Parkinson's.
Oh, okay. Got it.
But the brain has this remarkable biological ability to reorganize itself. It can physically form entirely new neural connections to bypass the damage.
So we can forge new pathways for voice, balance, posture.
All of it. But, and this is crucial for the presenter to convey, a garden doesn't tend itself. It requires an active, sweating gardener.
Which brings us directly to day one. You're standing in front of them, and before you can plant this beautiful new garden, you got to pull up the weeds of misinformation.
There are so many weeds.
So many. But as a presenter, what do you do if a patient in the room is highly resistant on day one? Like, what if they're weeping or angry and they just refuse to engage with this whole garden metaphor?
Well, you start by acknowledging the room. You have to validate their grief, fear, anxiety, depression. These are completely normal responses to hearing the words, "You have Parkinson's."
It's a trauma.
It is. And if you try to skip over the emotional trauma and just, feed them facts, their brains literally will not process the information.
Because of the stress.
Exactly. High stress means high cortisol, and cortisol actively blocks learning and memory formation.
Oh, wow, it biologically blocks it.
Yeah. So you have to let them know that their terror is valid, which chemically lowers their threat response, and that prepares their minds to actually hear you.
That makes a lot of sense. You have to lower the shield before you can offer the sword.
I like that, yes.
They walk in believing they've been handed a rapid death sentence.
Mhm.
So your job on day one is to deliver the real truth, which is that Parkinson's is actually a slow-developing condition.
Very slow, yeah.
And then you hit them with that staggering fact we started with. You tell them they can reduce their symptoms by up to 60%,
Improve their medication absorption.
increase their mobility, and all without any new medicines yet.
That is where the light returns to their eyes.
Mm.
It really is. But you can't just throw out a statistic. You must provide the research foundation.
You got to back it up.
Right. You explain neuroprotection. You teach them that high-intensity activity acts as a literal biological shield.
How does that work?
It alters the brain's environment to defend the remaining healthy neurons from degeneration. It actually alters the overall trajectory of the disease.
That's incredible. You also introduced the use it or lose it principle here, right?
Yes, absolutely.
I know programs like LSVT, AllowUD are often cited here, but I want to make sure I really understand the mechanism. I know Parkinson's affects movement, but how exactly does it affect someone's voice volume?
Okay, so it's a sensory scaling glitch. Parkinson's basically alters the brain's internal perception of volume.
Like the internal dial gets messed up.
Exactly. A person with Parkinson's genuinely thinks they are shouting, but they're actually whispering. Their sensory feedback loop is providing false data.
Oh man, that must be so frustrating.
It is. But the LSVT LIUD program proves that through intense, repetitive vocal exercises, you can physically rewire the brain to recalibrate that scaling.
So you force it back to normal.
You force the brain to recognize the new, louder volume as normal. It's structural, measurable neuroplasticity in action.
So you spend day one just blowing their minds with the science of their own potential.
Setting the stage.
Right. And you end that first day not with another lecture, but with a testimony from a peer or a team member, someone who has been where they are and has fought back.
And what's fascinating here is the biology of why peer testimony works so much better than a clinical lecture.
Wait, there's a biological reason for that too.
Oh, yeah. You could have the world's leading neurologist explain the science, but seeing a peer succeed triggers a psychological construct identified by Albert Bandura called self-efficacy.
Self-efficacy, that's like believing you can actually do it.
It's the deeply held belief in your own capability, yeah. And research consistently shows that self-efficacy, not the clinical severity of the disease, is the #1 predictor of success in physical therapy.
The #1 predictor, wow.
When they see a peer succeeding, their brain reassesses the threat level of the disease. That realization literally reduces the fight-or-flight response.
Which means less cortisol.
Less cortisol, and it tangibly lowers muscle rigidity right there in the room.
Lowering rigidity through a change in perspective. That is incredible.
It's the mind-body connection in real time.
So day one validates the grief, lowers the cortisol, dispels the myths, and gives them agency. They are primed.
Fully primed.
So day two is where you hand them the actual tools.
Yeah.
You introduce the Regen Protocol's 4 pillars approach.
Right. The 4 pillars are the structural foundation.
Yeah.
You have to explain that if a house has only one wall, it collapses. You teach them that all 4 are mandatory.
Okay, let's go through them.
Pillar 1 is medicine. This is the fuel. It's essential for easing symptoms so that movement is possible. But you must be very clear that a neurologist cannot prescribe happiness.
Right, pills don't give you a good life, just the ability to move.
Exactly. Medicine is the baseline, not the cure.
Got it. Pillar 2 is physical movement, which we need to dive into heavily in a second because that's the real rewiring process. But pillar 3 is lifestyle.
The soil of the garden.
Yeah, the soil. You talked to them about the Mediterranean or mind diet and the critical importance of gut health.
And we should pause on lifestyle for a second, actually. Presenters must emphasize strict sleep hygiene here.
Sleep is that important.
Crucial. Sleep is when the brain flushes out metabolic waste. If they aren't sleeping, they're building up the acid rain of cortisol in their system.
Which blocks the learning again.
Exactly. It chemically blocks the formation of those new neural pathways they're working so hard to build.
Man, everything connects back to cortisol. Okay, pillar 4 is psychology, the mindset, rejecting the victim identity.
Huge part of it.
We know from the Parkinson's Outcomes Project that mood and depression actually impact a patient's health status more than their physical motor symptoms do.
Yes. It's staggering but true. But let's go back to Pillar 2, physical movement, because a massive part of Day 2's curriculum is explaining the difference between standard exercise and neurological physiotherapy.
Also called neurotherapy, right?
Right, neurotherapy.
Because I can imagine a patient sitting there saying, I already walk on a treadmill for 30 minutes a day, so I'm good. Wait, if getting your heart rate up on a treadmill is good for your body, why isn't that enough to trigger the brain rewiring? What's the biological difference?
Okay, so standard physical therapy or just a casual treadmill walk isn't enough because their body's hardware, like the muscles themselves, are generally fine.
The muscles aren't the problem.
No, the problem is the software, specifically a region deep in the brain called the basal ganglia.
The basal ganglia.
Yeah. It acts as our autopilot for automated movements, like walking or swinging our arms. But because Parkinson's depletes the dopamine that the basal ganglia relies on, the autopilot starts glitching.
So if they just mindlessly walk on a treadmill while watching TV.
They are relying on a broken autopilot. It reinforces bad pathways.
Here's where it gets really interesting. As the presenter, you have to look at your class and tell them they must now think before they move.
Yes, conscious movement.
You're switching them from automatic transmission to manual. I like to use this analogy for the class. It's like sleeping with a broken rib.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah. If you usually sleep on your side and suddenly you have a broken rib, you have to sleep on your back. For the first few nights, it takes immense conscious effort. You have to force yourself to stay on your back.
Right, you can't just relax into it.
No. But eventually, the brain adapts, the new pathway is formed, and sleeping on your back becomes the new automatic.
And that conscious manual override is the absolute heart of neurotherapy. They must execute movements that feel massively exaggerated.
Big movements.
Huge. And to truly force that rewiring, you introduce the concept of forced exercise. This stems from Dr. Jay Albert's research on cycling.
I've heard of this cycling study, but I don't really know the mechanics of it. How does riding a bike change the brain?
Okay, so Dr. Alberts found that if you put someone with Parkinson's on a stationary bike and let them pedal at their preferred, comfortable rate, say 50 to 60 revolutions per minute.
They burn calories, sure.
Yeah, they burn calories, they get cardiovascular benefits, but there is minimal motor improvement. It does not change the brain.
So what changes the brain?
The magic zone. You have to force the cadence up to 80 to 90 RPM. That's about 30% past their comfort zone.
Wait, what happens chemically at 80 and 90 RPM that doesn't happen at 60?
When you push the brain past the false signals of fatigue and slowness generated by that dopamine-deprived basal ganglia, you induce a highly specific biological stress response.
The good kind of stress.
Exactly. That intense forced effort signals the brain to release a protein called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
BDNF.
BDNF is essentially miracle grow for the brain. It's the exact fertilizer required to grow those new neural pathways around the damaged areas.
Wow.
But if you stay in your comfort zone, the miracle grow stays locked away.
You're teaching them to be their own pharmacists, dispensing BDNF through intense conscious effort.
That's exactly what it is.
That is such an empowering message to end day 2 on. So by the time you get to days 3 and 4, they understand the mechanics, the engine is primed.
Yep, they get the why and the how.
Now, the final 2 days of this program are entirely about sustainability. How do they keep this up for the rest of their lives without burning out? That's where you introduce the ACMA protocol.
Right. ACMA is the psychological roadmap you guide them through. It stands for Accept, Comprehend, Motivate, and Action.
And it's a strict sequence, right?
Yes. You cannot jump to action without moving through the first 3.
The first step, acceptance, is notoriously the hardest. It's easy for people to confuse acceptance with surrender.
Very common mistake.
I tell presenters to give their class a different visual. Imagine you're the captain of a ship that just hit a reef. Acceptance isn't throwing your hands up and letting the ship sink.
Giving up.
Right. Acceptance is taking a flashlight, going down into the dark hull, and taking a brutal, honest inventory of exactly how much water is coming in. You have to look at the damage clearly so you know exactly which holes to patch.
That is the perfect way to frame it.
Yeah.
Really. And once they take that inventory, they move to comprehend.
Which is understanding the disease.
Gaining health literacy, yeah. Understanding the mechanics of their condition removes the terror of the unknown.
Because it's not a mystery monster anymore.
Exactly. Then comes motivate. And this is a critical juncture for the presenter. You must explain that motivation isn't just a warm, fuzzy feeling. It has sheer biological power.
Biological power. Okay, you have my attention.
You introduce the expectancy effect, specifically looking at the nocebo and placebo effects in Parkinson's.
Is there actual science behind hope, like hard biological science that you can show a class?
Absolutely there is. You look at the research from neuroscientists like Sarah Lidstone. Her work proves that conviction physically alters brain chemistry.
Conviction.
Yes. When a patient is entirely convinced that an intervention will work when they truly expect a positive outcome, their brain actually releases endogenous dopamine directly into the striatum.
Wait, hold on. Just the pure belief that a therapy is going to work causes the brain to release the exact chemical they are deficient in.
Yes. The expectation of improvement triggers a chemical event that temporarily improves motor function. That is the biological power of hope.
That is mind-blowing.
But you must warn them that the reverse is equally powerful.
The nocebo effect.
Exactly. If they have negative expectations, it activates the stress response. This spikes their cortisol levels, which actively blocks dopamine receptors and actually facilitates pain transmission.
Negative thinking creates a physical barrier to movement.
It literally does, which leads directly into the greatest danger you must warn them about, the vortex of apathy.
Apathy. Yeah, you have to be incredibly direct about this. The vortex of apathy is the #1 threat to a person with Parkinson's.
More than any physical symptom.
It's not a motor symptom. It's the profound loss of interest in life. If they give in to the grief, if they go home, sit in a dark room, and stop caring about their hobbies or their families, they eliminate all neuroprotection.
Without engagement, neuroplasticity shuts down entirely.
It just stops.
If they aren't challenging the brain stops trying to bypass the damage. The degeneration speeds up exponentially.
And this is exactly why days 3 and 4 involve intense group discussions, and crucially, they must involve the family.
Oh, the family's role is massive.
You must speak directly to the partners and adult children in the room. The family members are not just observers, they are co-therapists.
Co-therapists, I like that term.
They have to provide that continuous positive reinforcement to keep the dopamine loops active.
However, you also have to caution the families about the caregiver trap.
The caregiver trap. Yeah, this is so common.
It is. A well-meaning spouse, acting out of pure love and fear, will suddenly start doing everything for the person with Parkinson's. They button their shirts, they cut their food, they help them out of chairs.
They treat them like a helpless victim.
And by doing that, they strip the person of their identity and their autonomy.
But connecting it back to the science we talked about on day 2, if the caregiver removes all the physical struggle, they are removing the trigger for BDNF.
Yes, you nailed it.
The struggle is what releases the miracle grow. The family has to let them struggle. They have to push them to reach that 80 to 90 RPM magic zone in their daily lives, whether that's getting dressed or going for a walk.
The family has to be cheerleaders, not servants. The entire 4-day course culminates in a profound recalibration of what the future holds.
Recalibrating.
You're ending the program not by teaching them how to manage a steady decline, but by planning for the years ahead. You ask the room, what are we doing next year? Where are we traveling? What new skills are we learning?
And you teach them to answer with absolute conviction. Because you can.
Because you can. That's it.
That is the note you end on. So, what does this all mean for you, the presenter, getting ready to walk into that room?
It means everything.
It means your mission over these 11 hours is nothing short of transformative. You are taking people paralyzed by the shock of a broken machine, and you are handing them the tools to tend a living, growing garden.
Right.
You are teaching them to dispel the myths, to embrace the rigorous manual control of neurotherapy, to build their lives on the 4 pillars, and to lean on their families to fight the vortex of apathy. You are giving them their lives back.
It's a remarkable protocol, and mastering it will truly change the lives of the people in your classroom.
It really will.
But, it also raises an important question that extends far beyond the walls of the European Parkinson Therapy Center.
Oh, how so?
Well, while this course is meticulously designed to save the quality of life for those facing Parkinson's, the reality is that every single one of us is dealing with a neurodegenerative condition.
Wait, what do you mean?
It's called aging.
Oh, wow, okay.
Right. If the garden metaphor and the intense conscious application of neuroplasticity can physically rebuild a brain navigating a disease like Parkinson's, we kind of have to ask ourselves a question.
Which is?
How many weeds are we letting grow in our own minds simply because we've gotten comfortable? because we've stopped forcing ourselves into the magic zone of intense effort and stopped doing the hard work of learning new things.
That is a fascinating thought to leave on, because you can always build a better garden.